Ancient stones have secrets, things no one alive today can really know. There are 30 archaeological mysteries that still don't make sense to historians. And after hearing them, history might feel different. How a civilization moved statues weighing 80 tons without using wheels, or why someone would carve a whole book in a language that doesn't exist. These aren't just old puzzles, they're gaps, missing pieces in the story of us. Each one is a quiet challenge to what we believe about the past. Our greatest monuments, they're often the most mysterious. What does that say about us? A city of concentric rings, immense power, advanced knowledge vanished into the sea. That's the story Plato told over 2,000 years ago. He described an island kingdom, Atlantis, a naval power that conquered parts of Europe and Africa, then fell out of favor with the gods, and the punishment was severe. The entire civilization was swallowed by the ocean, a single day and night of misfortune. Since then, Atlantis has been more than a legend. It's history's most epic treasure hunt. A ghost haunting our maps, our imagination. The historian Charles also noted that Atlantis has been placed in Antarctica, the Andes, under the South China Sea. He called it a lesson in how a story gets adapted to fit the hopes and fears of every generation. That's the core of this first mystery. Was Atlantis a brilliant invention? A philosophical fable by Plato warning about pride and corruption, or was it a distant echo, a real catastrophe, a cultural memory passed down of a devastating event? Many researchers point to the volcanic eruption on Thera, modern Santorini, around 1600 BCE. It decimated the Minoan civilization. That event could have inspired tales of a kingdom lost to the sea. Others look to places like the Richat structure in Mauritania, a striking natural formation. From above, it eerily resembles Plato's concentric rings. But despite centuries of searching with advanced technology, no definitive proof has emerged from beneath the waves. The ocean keeps its secrets. Maybe the true power of Atlantis isn't in a physical location. Maybe it's in what the pursuit reveals about us, our longing for a golden age, a reminder of a time when humanity supposedly knew more, built greater, lived in harmony. It's a mystery that speaks to a deep desire to find a lost chapter in our own story. And while we search the depths for a sunken world, another profound mystery sits in plain sight. Carved in stone on a remote, wind-swept island, their gaze is fixed on the horizon, a silent council of giants watching over an empty landscape. When the Dutch explorer Jacob Roggeveen arrived, it was Easter Sunday, 1722. He and his crew saw something that defied understanding. Hundreds of colossal stone figures were scattered across the island. Their backs were to the sea. Their expressions were solemn, remote. These are the Moai of Rapa Nui. We often picture them as heads, but they're complete torsos. Many are buried up to their shoulders by centuries of soil. They are a staggering achievement of Polynesian engineering, carved from volcanic tuff at the Roanoke quarry. But they're also the centerpiece of one of archaeology's most enduring cautionary tales. The story goes that a society obsessed with erecting these monuments cut down every last tree to move them, that this triggered an ecological collapse, a social collapse. This narrative of ecocide is powerful. It warns of a people who literally sawed off the branch they were sitting on. But what if that story is wrong? Archaeologists like Terry Hunt and Carl Lipo have challenged this view. Their research suggests the island's deforestation was a complex process. It involved the arrival of invasive rats, which prevented forest regeneration. And it involved the natural clearing of land for agriculture by a thriving population. The societal collapse, they argue, came much later. It came primarily with the arrival of Europeans and the devastating impacts they brought. This reframes the mystery. The Moai were not the cause of a downfall. They were perhaps a brilliant adaptation, a focal point for social cohesion and identity in a challenging, isolated environment. This shift in thinking makes the core logistical mystery even more compelling. How did a people with no wheels, no metal tools, and no large draft animals move statues weighing up to 80 tons for miles across rugged terrain? The classic theory involved elaborate systems of log rollers and rope, but Hunt and Lipo champion a different idea, an elegantly simple one. They proposed the Moai were walked. Using a system of ropes, teams would rock the statue side to side, inching it forward in a dynamic, upright shuffle. Experiments have shown it's possible with relatively small groups. It's a captivating image, a giant stone figure seeming to march across the island under human guidance. But the mystery deepens at the quarry itself. Here, nearly 400 Moai remain in various states of completion. It's as if the work simply stopped one day. The largest, nicknamed El Gigant, lies unfinished, a colossus of 270 tons that never began its journey. Was this a sudden event, a societal shift in priorities, or a gradual abandonment we simply don't understand? And what of their final form? The statues were placed on stone platforms called ahu, which were often burial sites. Many were crowned with pukao, large cylinders of red scoria stone representing topknots or hair. Placing these multi-ton caps on heads already over 30 feet tall was another feat of engineering with no clear blueprint. The silent giants of Easter Island ask us difficult questions about belief, ambition, and our relationship with the world around us. Were they markers of clan territory? Representations of deified ancestors, conduits for spiritual power? Their construction, regardless of the ecological outcome, required extraordinary cooperation. It required resource management and shared purpose. They stand not merely as ruins of a fallen society, but as monuments to human ingenuity in the face of immense geographic isolation. A testament written in stone, yet one whose final chapter we are still learning to read. This tangible, physical mystery of movement and meaning finds a strange parallel in a discovery that is all about symbols. A script carved into wood, a code that has resisted every attempt to crack it. In 1912, Wilfred Voynich bought a book, a small one about 200 pages, bound in vellum. But it wasn't like other books from that time. It had drawings of plants nobody could recognize. It had astrological charts with strange zodiac signs. It had these diagrams of nude women bathing in these tubes, these green, liquid tubes, and all around the pictures there was writing, a flowing script in an alphabet that doesn't match anything we know. That's the Voynich Manuscript. For more than a century now, it's been this unsolvable thing. Code breakers have tried. The ones who broke the Enigma machines in the war, they looked at it. They couldn't figure it out. It makes you realize, as Deborah Harkness has pointed out, how much about the medieval world we just don't know, how much might be gone. People have all sorts of ideas about where it came from. One idea is that it's a hoax, a fake made to trick a rich collector, but that has a problem. When you analyze the text statistically, it looks like a real language. The word lengths, how often letters appear, how they group together. It follows rules. It has a structure that's very hard to fake by hand, so it probably means something. If it's a code, what's in it? Some think it's about women's health because of those bathing figures and the plants. Others think it's an invented language or a real one that's been lost. Lately, there are claims it's been decoded, that it's a proto-Romance language or a guide to reproduction. But other scholars don't accept that. There's no agreed upon translation, which leads to another question. If it's real, why encode it so totally? What was so important or so dangerous to hide behind all these symbols? And if it's a fake, why would anyone spend that much time, years of work, to make something so complicated? For what? The book is at Yale now. It just sits there. A reminder that there are things we can't understand. It makes you think about other lost messages, other things from the past we just can't read. That's one kind of mystery. A message you can hold but can't comprehend. Then there's the opposite, a message that's perfectly clear in its shape but makes no sense in its purpose. One that's not in a book at all, one drawn so large you have to be in the sky to see it. From the ground, it's just scratches, but from above, the desert floor changes. It becomes these shapes: triangles, trapezoids, spirals that go for miles, and these huge figures: a hummingbird, a spider, a monkey with its tail coiled. These are the Nazca Lines. They're in southern Peru, made by a people who were there from about 500 BC to 500 CE. How they did it was simple. They took the top layer of dark stones away. Underneath was lighter, chalky soil. That contrast has lasted over 1,000 years, but that simplicity, it makes the real question bigger. Why put that much work into something you can't even see? You'd have to be in the air to see it, and they couldn't fly. For decades, a German mathematician and archaeologist, Piri Reis, she lived right there. In a small house by the desert, she mapped everything, measured it. Her main idea was that the lines were a giant calendar, an astronomical one, certain lines pointing to the solstice sun or to constellations. A map connecting the earth to the sky, but other researchers, they look at something else: water. This is one of the driest places on earth. The lines might have been ritual pathways for ceremonies to call for water from the gods. Those giant shapes, the animals, the plants, they could have been sacred. Part of that appeal, that theory ties the lines to survival, to a community's deepest hope and fear, and the mystery isn't finished. In 2020, a new geoglyph was found on a hillside, a massive cat 200 feet long. Its lines were faded, but you could see it, so we're still finding new messages. Even now, there's still so much we haven't seen. So what were they? A prayer written on the land for the gods to read from above, or a sacred map meant to be walked? People in a trance tracing the paths of what they believed. The Nazca Lines, they make you think of a world where the landscape itself was a text, where the practical and the spiritual weren't separate, they were blurred. But while these messages were drawn out in the open, for the sky to see, another civilization did the opposite. They carved their greatest secrets into the heart of a mountain, into a city meant to be invisible. The desert lines are a code we can see but not read. But then there's the opposite problem, a device we can hold whose purpose was finally clear, but its existence doesn't fit. It shouldn't be there. It was found by sponge divers in 1901 off the Greek island Antikythera. They were looking for sponges in the Aegean when they saw a shipwreck on the bottom, a Roman cargo ship from the 1st century BC. Among the broken pottery and statues, they brought up this lump, corroded bronze and wood about the size of a large book. It just looked like debris. But decades later, researchers cleaned it, they X-rayed it, and inside were gear wheels, precise teeth, inscribed plates. They called it the Antikythera Mechanism. It's the oldest analog computer we know, a machine of staggering complexity, and it's over 1,000 years older than anything like it. As the scientist Tony Freeth said, it's just extraordinary. The only one. It changes the history of technology. So what did it do? It wasn't a clock, it was a celestial calculator. You'd turn a crank on the side. That moved time forward or backward, and dials on the front and back would turn. They showed the predicted positions of the sun and the moon and the 5 planets the Greeks knew. It could predict eclipses. It tracked the 4-year cycle of the Olympic Games. It was a portable model of their universe. To do this, it used engineering we thought came much later. The gear trains are precise mathematical models. The teeth match astronomical ratios, and most astonishing, it has a differential gear. That's a complex assembly that averages 2 speeds. We thought it was invented in the 16th century. This device had one 2,000 years ago. The inscriptions on the casing aren't random, they're a user manual. Explaining each dial, this brilliance makes the mystery deeper. Who built it? The main theory points to Archimedes. Texts say he made a sophisticated planetarium. Could this be a descendant of his work from a workshop in Corinth or Syracuse? And if they could build this, what else could they do? That's the haunting question. How many of these were there? Was this a unique masterpiece, or was it common? A technology more widespread than we think, and what happened to that knowledge? The ship sank, but did the understanding sink too? The mechanism shows the fragility of advancement. It's a single salvaged data point, proof that a branch of high technology flourished in the ancient world, then was lost. It whispers of a parallel path of progress that vanished. This one intricate machine shows a pinnacle of miniature engineering, and it stands in total contrast to the next mystery, which is a question of brute, monumental scale. How do you move a stone block the size of a 5-story building using only Stone Age tools? The scale is hard to even think about. The Great Pyramid of Giza is out there in the desert. It's the only one left of the old Seven Wonders, a mountain built by people. To make it, they had to cut and move and set something like 2.3 million blocks of stone. Each block around 2.5 tons. Some of the granite pieces inside go over 60 tons, and this was a Bronze Age culture. No iron tools, no pulleys, no wheels, not like we have. The real puzzle isn't just how they did it, it's how they did it with that kind of precision. The base is level to within an inch. The sides are aligned to true north, almost perfect, with an error smaller than 1/15 of a degree. This isn't just piling up rocks, this is engineering on another level. That feeling of impossibility led to a lot of stories over the years. Lost technology, outside help, but archaeology has moved past that. The real answers are probably more human and, in a way, more incredible. For a long time, the main idea was ramps, but what sort of ramp? A straight ramp going out from the pyramid would have been enormous, needing as much material as the pyramid. A ramp that zigzagged up the sides makes more sense, and they found evidence for a construction ramp like that at a different site, the Hatnub Alabaster Quarry. A steep ramp with stairs and post holes, a system for dragging sleds up with ropes. There's another idea about water, using canals, floating the limestone blocks on barges when the Nile flooded. A few years back, they found a papyrus diary from a foreman, Murrah. He wrote about moving limestone from Tura to Giza by boat, using a network of canals. It's a direct look at the logistics. Even with all that, the time it took is hard to believe. Herodotus said it was built in 20 years. An engineer, Peter James, pointed out what that means. It would be placing a block perfectly every 4.5 minutes non-stop for 20 years. He and others think it took longer, or maybe it wasn't just a tomb. Then you have the numbers. The pyramid's measurements seem to line up with mathematical constants. The ratio of the perimeter to the height is very close to 2 pi. Was that on purpose? We might never know, but maybe the biggest wonder isn't the engineering, it's the organization. This needed thousands of people working together. Not slaves, probably, skilled workers, farmers when the fields were flooded. It needed architects, engineers, people to cook and heal. It was a national project. It showed what that civilization could do. That precision is about will, focused over generations. It's the complete opposite of the next kind of mystery, where that will disappear suddenly, leaving behind not a monument but just silence. The pyramids showed what a unified civilization could do, but then you have to ask what happens when that unity falls apart, and not just in one place. Everywhere, all at once, around 1200 BC, the world did fall apart. It was a world of kings, chariots, clay tablets and bronze. The great empires were all there. The Hittites in Anatolia, the Mycenaeans in Greece, the Egyptians of the New Kingdom, Ugarit, Babylon, they were connected. They traded tin and copper to make bronze. They exchanged letters, royal gifts, they signed treaties. It was a complex system, a globalized system for its time, and then, in just a few decades, it all crashed down. Palaces and cities from Greece to the Levant burned or were just abandoned. Writing systems vanished like linear B. Long-distance trade collapsed. A dark age came. The art of writing was forgotten for centuries, one of the most dramatic resets in human history. So what could cause that, such a widespread systemic failure? Archaeologist Eric Klein describes it not as one cataclysm, but a perfect storm of calamities. Climate data from tree rings, sediment cores points to a prolonged, severe drought. That drought would have meant crop failures, famine, the movement of desperate populations. At the same time, evidence suggests a spike in earthquake activity across the region. Shaking the foundations of these stone-built societies, these natural disasters strained the social order, sparking internal rebellions most likely. Civil unrest, and then from the sea came a new force, a terrifying one. Egyptian records speak of confederations of invaders. They called them the Sea Peoples. They're depicted in reliefs at Medinet Habu, fighting in great sea battles. But who were they? Where did they come from? The records don't say. They may have been a mix of displaced peoples from the collapsing West. Maybe from the Aegean or Anatolia, turned into marauding armies by the wider crisis. The city of Ugarit gives us a snapshot, a chilling one, a wealthy port on the coast of modern Syria. Archaeological layers show a city consumed by a violent fire. A tablet was found in its ruins, a desperate, final letter. It's a reply from the king of Ugarit to a plea for help from another king. He writes, "My father, behold, the enemy's ships came. My cities were burned. They did evil things in my country." The letter ends with a haunting line. It says, "It is now that the enemy troops are encamped near my city. They have set fire to my country. Consider this, my father, and know that all my troops are stationed in the Hittite country. And all my ships are in the land of Lucca. The help you request is not available." The letter was never sent. It was baked in the fire that destroyed the city. A frozen moment of systemic failure. The troops were away, the ships were elsewhere. The network of alliances had broken down completely, and that's the core of the mystery. Was it the invasions that caused the collapse, or were the invasions a symptom of it? Klein argues that the very interconnectedness that made the late Bronze Age prosperous also made it fragile. A drought in one region could disrupt the tin trade in another. An earthquake could topple a capital, create a power vacuum. The system was so linked that a shock in one area could ripple outward, creating a cascade of failures. No single cause was likely enough, but together they overwhelmed these complex societies. They couldn't adapt. It forces a difficult question about our own world. Does increased interconnection make us more resilient or more vulnerable? The silence that followed the Bronze Age collapse lasted for generations. But from that silence, in a different part of the world, a new kind of mystery would eventually emerge. Not about a society's end, but about a single, startling discovery, one that defies all expectation. The silence after the Bronze Age collapse was a gap in the record. But sometimes a silence is more recent, more personal. It's the silence of an empty settlement. In 1587, about 115 English men, women, and children landed on Roanoke Island. Off the coast of what's now North Carolina, Governor John White led them. His daughter, Elena Dare, was with them. She had a baby girl there. They named her Virginia. Virginia Dare was the first English child known to be born in the Americas. It was a fragile foothold. The next year, Governor White sailed back to England for supplies. Desperately needed supplies, but war with Spain delayed everything. He couldn't return until 1590, and when he got back to Roanoke, he found nothing. No people, no bodies, the settlement was just gone. The houses had been taken apart carefully, not destroyed, and there were carvings on a post the word Croatoan. On a tree just Ciaro, there was no cross, which was their sign for distress, so it seemed planned, as if they meant to leave, but for where, that was the start of the mystery. The lost colony. Governor White wanted to search Croatoan Island, where a friendly tribe lived, but a storm pushed his ships back to England. He never returned. Never found his family, so what happened? The carving points toward integration. That's the leading theory, that the colonists, facing extreme hardship, split up. Sought refuge with the Croatan people or other communities nearby. Decades later, there were reports. Later English settlers met indigenous people with grey eyes, who spoke of ancestors who could read from a book. There were tales of stone tablets with English inscriptions found inland, but no definitive archaeological evidence has ever linked them to a specific site. Other theories suggest a darker end: conflict, illness, starvation, but the fort site showed no signs of a struggle, no evidence of a violent attack. Roanoke wasn't a total failure, it was a tragic prelude. It tested English models of colonization here. It revealed the immense pressure of isolation. In an unfamiliar land, it makes you consider their choice, an impossible choice: stay and risk vanishing, or leave and become part of a new community. Vanishing from the historical record in a different way, their story is a reminder of how thin the line was between survival and being erased. One group vanished into the forest, leaving only a word behind. There's a shape in southern Ohio. You can only see it from above. The earth rises into this form, a serpent over 1,000 feet long. Its body curves in 7 coils. It ends with an open jaw, like it's swallowing an oval, maybe an egg. That's the Great Serpent Mound, the largest effigy mound on Earth. Built by the fort ancient people, probably around 1000 CE. Some think it's older, from the Adena culture. They built it with baskets of soil and clay. From the ground, the scale is disorienting. You can walk along its spine, but you can't see the serpent. To understand it, you have to leave the ground. That's the first mystery. Why build something you can't see? The main theory looks up. The serpent's head aligns with the setting sun on the summer solstice. The coils mark other events: equinox sunrises, moonrises. William Romaine studied these alignments. He suggested it was a calendar, a giant earthen clock, tracking seasons, telling people when to plant, when to harvest, when to hold ceremonies. It tied their lives to cosmic cycles, but a serpent swallowing an egg, that's a symbol. Found in creation myths everywhere. Some think it marks a specific event, like Halley's Comet in 1066. Maybe they saw it as a serpent of light in the sky. Others see it as a boundary between the known world and the unknown, between Earth and the supernatural. What deepens the mystery is what isn't there. Unlike other mounds, there are no artifacts, no tools, no human remains. It wasn't a tomb. It was built for a purpose that left no physical trace, only intention. That suggests a ceremonial function or an observational one, a place for ritual, for gathering, for looking at the sky and finding meaning in the patterns. It speaks to an impulse to take the chaotic natural world and impose a story, to shape the land into a symbol so vast it becomes the landscape. We build these giant signatures as if to say, we were here and we understood something. But what they understood whispers now through alignments of light and shadow. This earthen serpent slithers across time. Its head points toward a solstice sun, and toward another mystery of shaped earth, one made not of soil but of stone, found not in orderly rows but in perfect, puzzling spheres. The workers were clearing jungle for banana plantations when their machetes hit something hard. This was in the 1930s. The United Fruit Company was cutting through the forest in Costa Rica, in the Diquis Delta. They cleared the underbrush and found stone. Not just stone, perfectly round stone. They kept digging and found more of them, hundreds. They're called Los Bolas now, the stone spheres of Costa Rica. Some are as small as a grapefruit, others are over 2 meters across, weighing 16 tons. They're a pre-Columbian mystery made by the Diquis culture sometime between 300 and 1500 CE. The rock is gabbro. It's a hard volcanic stone, and the precision is what gets you. Many are so perfectly round that modern tools measure a variance of less than 2 centimeters across the whole surface. They were shaped with other stones, probably by pecking and grinding, then polished smooth. But how did they do that without metal tools, without any written plans? That's the first part of the puzzle. The second part, and the more frustrating one, is that we might never know what they were for. When they were found, a lot of the spheres were moved with tractors. Taken as curiosities, used as lawn decorations. Some were even dynamited by treasure hunters who thought there was gold inside. That destroyed their original positions. The archaeological context was gone, the pattern was lost, and without the pattern, the meaning floats away. Could they have been astronomical markers? Aligned to stars or the solstice sun, some researchers see groupings that might point to celestial events, or were they status symbols showing a chief's power? The biggest ones would have taken a huge communal effort. They could have represented authority, maybe they marked territory, sacred spaces, or different clan lands. Or maybe they were purely symbolic, representations of the sun or the moon, or the idea of perfection itself. There's a theory they were arranged like constellations, or in lines tracing family lineages across the ground. We don't know. The Diquis culture left no written records. They faded before European contact, so the spheres stand alone. They speak to a human impulse to take the raw, imperfect material of the world and shape it into an ideal form. To impose geometry on chaos, the act of making a perfect sphere from rough gabbro, using only stone and sand and time, is an act of will. It makes you ask what a society values. Not for utility, but for meaning. Why invest so much labor in objects with no practical purpose? Maybe that was the point. A physical declaration of understanding, of control, of connection to something larger than daily life. From these enigmatic orbs placed with unknown intention, we go to a place where the intention is clear. A city not placed on the land but carved directly from it. A perfect sphere is something a person decides to make, but a city that almost disappears from view, that's something else. It was a cold day, December 1888. 2 ranchers, Richard Wetherill and Charlie Mason, were up on the mesa in southwestern Colorado. They were looking for cattle after a snowstorm. And they looked over the edge of the canyon, down into this deep alcove under a huge sandstone roof. They saw something that shouldn't have been there. A silent city made of stone, built right into the cliff, towers several stories high. Dozens of rooms stacked on top of each other, connected by ladders and small tunnels. They called it Cliff Palace, the largest cliff dwelling in North America, built by the ancestral Pueblones in the 1200s. The strange part isn't that it was lost. It's that it was left behind. By 1300, every one of these alcove cities in Mesa Verde was empty. The people just walked away from homes that had sheltered generations. So what would make a whole civilization leave a place like that? A fortress that was so clever, so defendable. Archaeologists talk about a push and a pull. The push was probably the environment. Tree ring studies, like the ones Timothy Kohler has worked on, show a really long drought, more than 20 years. In a place that was already dry, that would have ruined farming, springs would have gone dry. The pinon pine forests, a major food source, would have died off. And the things that made the cliff dwellings work so well, their defensibility, the tight community living, might have turned into problems. When resources get scarce, tensions can grow. But there was also a pull. To the south and southeast, new centers were forming, bigger communities with different social and religious structures. Places that would later become Hopi villages and pueblos along the Rio Grande. So this might not have been a desperate escape. It might have been a planned migration, a spiritual and cultural movement toward new water sources, new ways of living together. The buildings they left show how advanced they were. The masonry is precise-shaped sandstone blocks set in mortar. There are these round, underground rooms called kivas for ceremonies and gatherings. The buildings are placed to catch the winter sun for warmth and to avoid the summer heat. This wasn't some primitive hideout. It was a highly adapted society. Their leaving makes you think about the choices any community has to make. When does adapting mean changing where you are, and when does it mean going somewhere new? What mix of environmental pressure and cultural hope makes a people pack up their things, take one last look at a home carved from a cliff, and walk into an unknown future? They left behind an incredible monument to human resilience, not because people kept living there, but because they made a thoughtful, collective choice to start again. That journey south toward new rivers has a strange echo in another journey, a completely different one that didn't start in the canyons of the Southwest, but in the icy water of the North Atlantic. With a discovery that had no business being there, 2 college students were wading in the Columbia River. This was near Kennewick, Washington. It was July of 1996. They saw a human skull on the riverbed. Police came, coroners came, and they recovered a skeleton. It was nearly complete, and it was old, very old. Radiocarbon dating put it at about 9,000 years. That was Kennewick Man. Later, tribes called him the Ancient One. It should have been a moment for science, but it became a conflict, one of the biggest in modern archaeology. The initial analysis looked at the skull's shape. The anthropologist said it resembled populations from Polynesia or Japan, not modern Native American features. That observation started everything. Headlines jumped to conclusions. Was this proof of early Europeans in the Americas, a lost group from the Pacific? The story of how the continents were peopled seemed open again, but then it became more than science. It became legal. It became ethical. The Confederated Tribes of the Umatilla Reservation and 4 other tribal nations claimed him as an ancestor. They used a federal law, NAGPRA. They asked for the remains to be reburied. A group of scientists sued to stop it. They argued they needed to study the bones. To answer questions about human history, for 20 years the skeleton stayed in a museum vault. The courts debated who speaks for someone 9,000 years old. Is this crucial data or a relative who needs returning to the Earth? It was a public lesson, a collision of worldviews. Then, technology advanced. In 2015, a full DNA analysis was done. It showed his ancestry was closest to contemporary indigenous peoples of the Americas, especially tribes from the region where he was found. The European theories, the Polynesian theories, they were finished. Genetically, he was Native American. That finding cleared the legal path. In 2017, his remains were repatriated, and then, following tribal wishes, they were quietly reburied. So the genetic question is settled, but the mystery shifts. It moves somewhere else. The puzzle now isn't about his biological origins. It's about the questions his case forces open. How do you balance the drive for scientific knowledge with the rights of living cultures to care for their ancestors? What does it mean when science and oral tradition tell different parts of the same story? His case showed the story of the first Americans isn't one simple migration. It's likely many waves over millennia, complex patterns we're just starting to see. But more than that, it became a case study in respect. It asked archaeologists, it asked the public to consider a difficult idea, that some mysteries aren't puzzles to solve. They're relationships to honor, that the right to tell the story of the ancient dead might belong first to those who feel a living connection to them. That mystery is about identity, it's about belonging, and it stands in contrast to the next one, which isn't about a person at all, it's about a place. A place designed to be impersonal and completely silent. The stones look like they shouldn't stay up. Up on that ridge over Cusco, the walls of Sacsayhuamán run in this jagged, curving line. They're made from these huge limestone blocks. Every one is a different shape. Some are taller than a person. Others weigh over 100 tons, but they all fit. They fit together like a puzzle. The joints are so tight, for centuries people have said you can't get a piece of paper in there, not even a razor blade. And they did it all without mortar. This is the Inca Empire at its height, a skill with stone that seems impossible. So the question is, how? How did a people without the wheel, without iron, without writing, get this precise? On this scale, the ideas about it are as interesting as the walls. The simple one is stone hammers, pounding on the rock with harder stone, maybe bronze for the fine details. But that doesn't get you the perfect fit. Another idea is thermal shock. Build a fire right against the stone, get it hot, then throw cold water on it. The rock cracks in a clean line, makes it easier to work. Then there's the story from the chronicler, Garcilaso de la Vega. He said the Inca knew a plant. Its juice could soften stone, let them mold the blocks like clay until they hardened again. Science doesn't know that plant, but the story shows the awe it created. Even for people who saw it done, what Sacsayhuamán was for is another layer. Its name means something like satisfied falcon. Those zigzag walls are strong fortifications. From up there, defenders could throw things down on anyone, but it was also a ceremonial place. The big plaza held thousands for rituals, and more than anything, it was a symbol. A statement of Inca power and their right to rule. You could see it from the city below. They were reshaping the earth itself to match their view of the world. The knowledge needed was deep. The master masons would have understood the rock, the angles, the balance. This wasn't just force, it was an art passed down. And then the empire fell suddenly, and that whole system of knowledge disappeared. So you have the walls, this perfect, silent question. How do you lose a technology that advanced? The stones of Sacsayhuamán are a permanent mark, but somewhere else, a great city didn't carve its name into stone. It let the jungle take it back and left only whispers. The walls of Sacsayhuamán are a known empire's permanent mark, but sometimes an explorer comes back from the wilderness with a story, a city with no name. In 1885, an American showman and adventurer, Guillermo Farini, made a claim. It echoed for over a century. He said he'd found a lost city. Not in a jungle, in the heart of the Kalahari Desert. He described it in lectures, in a book. Vast stone ruins, arches, pavements, a great wall, all half buried by red sand. A classic explorer's tale, a sudden discovery in an uncharted place. The idea was irresistible, a grand civilization flourishing in one of the world's harshest environments. It sparked the imagination. It launched a quest. For decades, other expeditions went looking. They followed his vague maps, his descriptions of landmarks. And they found nothing, no arches, no walls, just endless rolling dunes, rocky outcrops. The mystery deepened with each failed search. Was Farini a liar? Fabricating a tale for fame? Was he honestly mistaken, seeing what he desperately wanted to see? Or had he truly found something the desert had since reclaimed? The most compelling modern theory comes from geologists. They point to a natural formation in that region, known locally as the Giant's Playground. It's an area of immense, square-jointed dolerite boulders. Wind erosion has sculpted them into fantastic shapes. From certain angles, they can look eerily architectural. Lines of tumbled rock might resemble a crumbled wall. Flat, exposed bedrock can mimic paving. The human mind is a pattern-seeking machine, especially under the duress of a desert expedition. Thirst, heat, the sheer monotony of the landscape. They can play tricks. A mirage isn't just about water, it can be about meaning. Farini may have stumbled upon this geological wonder, and in his mind's eye transformed it into the ruins of a glorious past. This possibility asks reflective questions. about the stories we tell, how much of exploration is discovery, how much is projection. The romantic allure of a lost city speaks to a deep hope that the world still holds grand secrets, that history has hidden chapters, waiting for a lone adventurer to find. The Kalahari city, whether stone or story, endures because of that hope. It's a mystery less about archaeology, more about the explorer's heart, the desire to find order in the wild. To see the hand of a forgotten people in the chaos of stone, and from this phantom city of the desert, we turn to a discovery that was utterly real. Shockingly large, completely unexpected, a find not of walls but of silent, giant faces, staring up from the dark. There's architecture underwater, off the coast of Yonaguni Island in Japan. This was in 1986. A local diver, Kirkairo Aratake, was in the clear water there. He was looking for a new place to watch hammerhead sharks. And he found a structure, a huge monolithic form, rising from the seabed about 100 feet down. It looked like a stepped pyramid, like a ziggurat. With these sharp 90-degree angles, flat terraces, what looked like wide ramps and steps, the scale was staggering, over 250 feet long. 100 feet wide, nearly 80 feet tall. They called it the Yonaguni Monument, and once it was photographed, the debate started. Was it a lost city? Or a trick of nature? The arguments are strong on both sides. Geologist Robert Skock, he studied similar formations. He leans natural. The rock is sandstone. And this region is seismically hyperactive. Earthquakes are constant. Skock points out that sandstone fractures along flat plains, creates these sharp geometric shapes. The powerful currents there could erode and undercut the blocks, produce what look like steps, terraces, pillars. In his view, it's nature's own stonemasonry, shaped by tectonic forces over millennia. But then there's Masaki Kimura, a marine geologist. He's dived the site hundreds of times. He sees human hands. He points to features that seem to defy nature. Two tall, pillar-like rocks that look like they support a ceiling. What looks like a carved face on one wall. A channel around it that resembles a road and a stone circle, like it could have been a ceremonial space. Kimura believes the structure was modified, partially carved by people, maybe a temple or a fortress over 10,000 years ago, when sea levels were lower, when this was dry land. The implications are profound. If Kimura is right, it rewrites the timeline. Advanced culture in the Pacific, a society doing large-scale stonework at the end of the last ice age, long before the accepted dawn of Japanese civilization. A sunken chapter of human history. So how do we decide? The debate forces a fundamental question. Where is the line between a natural formation and a human one? Our eyes are trained to see patterns, familiar ones, steps, right angles. In a place of such raw geological power, the line blurs. Is that straight edge from a mason's tool? Or a perfectly timed seismic crack? The mystery of Yonaguni isn't just about one structure. It's about perception, our deep desire to find our own reflection in the ancient world. To see intention in the random artistry of the earth. This sunken enigma, whether temple or tectonic sculpture, it's a silent riddle written in stone and seawater. Their faces are silent down there in the sea, all those angles, but on land there was another civilization, and they left a different kind of silent thing. Thousands of them, little square stone seals, each one is a tiny masterpiece, carved with an elegant animal, a bull, an elephant, a rhino, or this mythical creature often called a unicorn. And above every animal, a line of symbols, precise symbols, cryptic. These seals, they come from the planned cities, the great cities of the Indus Valley. Mohenjo-Daro, Harappa. This civilization thrived along the rivers in what's now Pakistan and northwest India, about 4,500 years ago. They built these sophisticated cities, grid streets, advanced drainage, public baths, one of the world's earliest urban cultures, a contemporary of Egypt and Mesopotamia. And they had writing, but it's not like hieroglyphs, not like cuneiform. We can read those. The Indus Valley script is still a locked door, completely undeciphered. The challenge is just immense. The inscriptions are so short. Most are just 4 or 5 symbols. There's no bilingual text, no Rosetta Stone to give us a key. And crucially, we don't know what language they spoke. Was it an early Dravidian language? That's what linguist Asko Parpola has long theorized. Or was it something else entirely? Something lost without a trace, without the language, the symbols just float, untethered from meaning. Theories about the script's purpose, their educated guesses. Were the seals used in trade, stamped onto clay tags for bundles of goods, showing origin, contents, the owner? Their neat, portable design supports that. Or for administration, tracking goods in a complex urban economy, some researchers see a ritual function, that frequent unicorn symbol, this mysterious bovine with one horn. It often appears before what might be a ritual offering stand. Could these be invocations, names of deities, protective incantations? We just don't know. The unicorn itself, it's the most common sign, a perfect emblem of the whole mystery. It represented something profoundly important to them, and its meaning is utterly opaque to us. To look at these seals is to feel the weight of a lost conversation. You imagine the thoughts encoded there, laws, myths, prayers, commercial records. Poetry, an entire civilization's inner world compressed into neat rows of elegant signs. It's the ghost of a language, a reminder that history isn't just what was built. It's what was said and what was written. But while their symbols stay silent, there's another artifact from the ancient world, and it suggests a different kind of knowledge. One that seems to hum with a quiet, electrical potential. They found a clay jar near Baghdad in the 1930s. It was from a Parthian tomb, maybe 2,000 years old. A simple jar about 5 inches tall. Inside, there was a copper cylinder sealed to the mouth with asphalt. And inside that cylinder, an iron rod. The rod was isolated from the copper by the asphalt plug. To an archaeologist named Wilhelm Koenig, this looked familiar. It looked like a basic galvanic cell, a battery. That idea is electrifying. If it's right, it means a form of electrochemistry was known centuries before Volta invented the modern battery in 1800. The mainstream view is more mundane. Most scholars think it was a storage vessel for sacred scrolls. You'd roll a papyrus scroll around the iron rod, put it in the copper cylinder, seal it with asphalt to protect it. That's a practical, documented use, but the design is suggestive, because if you fill the jar with an acidic electrolyte, vinegar, or grape juice, something happens. A voltage generates between the copper and the iron. Experiments like those by a physicist named Arne Eggebrecht in the 70s showed a replica could produce about 1 volt. Not much, but link several jars together, you get more. So what could that tiny charge have been used for? The possibilities are modest. It could have been for electroplating, depositing a thin layer of gold or silver onto another metal. Some gilded artifacts from that period have plating so fine it's hard to explain by fire, gilding alone, or maybe medical therapy. Ancient Greek and Roman texts describe using electric fish to numb pain. A gentle, controllable current from a jar might have served a similar purpose, or a tool for religious spectacle, creating a tingling sensation or a faint glow in a statue to inspire awe. The mystery isn't that the Parthians had an electrical industry, it's that they might have stumbled upon a principle, understood it in a limited, practical way. And then that knowledge faded, unused, unshared. It becomes a question about how innovation spreads or doesn't, how we define technology. Is a technology only real if it's scaled and documented and built upon? Or can it be a fleeting spark of understanding, isolated in time, a road not taken? This jar, whether a scroll case or a primitive cell, challenges a linear view of progress. It suggests the path of discovery isn't a straight line. It's a field of scattered, occasional lights. Some are fanned into flame, others just glow for a moment in the dark before being buried again. This small jar speaks of potential, a quiet hum of possibility from the ancient world, and from that whisper of contained energy, we shift to a monument of immense, silent earth. A mound so large its purpose was to cover something from view. Monk's Mound is 100 feet high, sitting on the floodplain. It's a massive earthen pyramid. Its base covers 14 acres. This was the heart of a city. Around 1050, a place called Cahokia, right across from modern St. Louis, was a true metropolis. Maybe 20,000 people lived there. It was bigger than London then. This wasn't just a large village. It was a planned urban center with neighborhoods, plazas, and more than 120 mounds. The mystery of Cahokia isn't that it existed. It's how this complex society appeared so fast, and why, by 1350, it was mostly empty. Archaeologist Timothy Porcatat calls it the Big Bang. Within decades, people from across the region came here. They built Monk's Mound in stages, moving millions of baskets of dirt. The city's layout was a map of their cosmos. At the center was the Grand Plaza, a huge, leveled field for gatherings, and to the west they built something remarkable, a series of large timber circles. We call it Woodhenge. Red cedar posts were set in a wide circle, over 400 feet across. From a central post, the rising sun on the equinox would line up perfectly with a specific marker. Other posts marked the solstices. This was a precise solar calendar. It governed the farming and ceremonial cycles for a huge community. This sophisticated order suggests a powerful, centralized authority. But what kind of society was it? A find in a smaller mound, Mound 72, gives a complex and somber clue. There, archaeologists found remains of more than 250 people. Many were buried with great honor, with exquisite goods made of shell, copper, and mica. But others showed signs of a different end. They seemed part of one large ceremonial event. This points to a spiritual world where renewing the community may have been tied to profound offerings. It speaks to a cosmology where life, death, and the city's sustenance were deeply connected. So what happened to this flourishing experiment? The theories for its decline match its scale. One points to environmental strain. Such a dense population would have relied heavily on the surrounding forests for building and fuel, and on fertile bottomland for corn. Deforestation and soil depletion might have slowly undermined the city's foundation. Another suggests social unrest. The very hierarchy that built Monk's Mound and ran its ceremonies could have created inequality and conflict. Maybe there was a revolt against the ruling priests or chiefs. A third idea involves a spiritual migration. New religious movements may have emerged, pulling people away from the great center toward different ways of living and worshipping. It was likely a combination: environmental pressure cracking the social order, and new ideas offering a path away from a struggling center. Cahokia asks a fundamental question about human societies. What does it take to sustain a great urban experiment? It takes a shared story, a compelling cosmology that justifies the labor and the social order. It takes successful management of resources and people, and when that balance falters, the story can change. People can simply choose to walk away, leaving their monuments to the earth. From this grand, planned city that eventually emptied, we turn to a city designed from the start to be invisible. In 1963, a man in Turkey was working on his cellar. In Cappadocia, he broke through a wall and found a passage. It went down, and it opened into a city, underground. This was Derinkuyu, a city carved from the earth. 18 levels deep, over 200 feet down. It wasn't a natural cave, it was engineered, a planned refuge. It had living quarters for maybe 20,000 people. Stables for animals, churches, ventilation shafts that reached all the way to the bottom, rooms for making wine with presses, storerooms and kitchens. Miles of tunnels connecting everything, all of it carved from the soft volcanic rock there. The scale is hard to grasp, but the bigger mystery isn't the size. It's who built it and when. The common story connects it to early Christians, hiding from the Romans and later from Arab raids. That fits. There are chapels, crosses on the walls, but a lot of archaeologists think it's older. The first few levels might be much older, maybe from the Hittite time, 3,000 years ago or more. Then other peoples expanded it, Phrygians, Persians, Byzantines. It became a kind of archive, each generation adding its own rooms, a shared sanctuary built from fear. And from ingenuity, the engineering is simple and strong. Each level could be sealed off from the one above, with these huge stone doors. They were like millstones, rolled into a slot in the tunnel. One person could close it, securing the whole community below. A guide there once said you have to think of the community, everyone working together for safety. It wasn't a king's project, it was the work of neighbors, which makes you wonder, was it just a hiding place, a bolt hole for emergencies? Or was it more than that? They had livestock pens, wine presses, deep wells. That suggests long-term habitation, maybe during long wars up above, or during the harsh winters there. It represents a choice. When the surface world got too dangerous, too harsh, the solution wasn't to build walls up. It was to dig a world down, to invert the city, to find safety in the earth itself. What does that mean? When faced with a threat, the response was to disappear, not to flee across the land, but to go down, to create a secret, communal life in the dark, sustained by clever engineering and shared purpose. Derinkuyu is a monument to that, to collective survival. A chapter of history written not on parchment, but in negative space, in rooms carved out of solid rock. This hidden, inward-turning refuge is one kind of monument. It stands in contrast to another, one that stands completely in the open, on a wind-swept plain in England, yet it guards its secrets just as closely. The sun comes up over Salisbury Plain, and a single beam of light goes right through a gap in the stones, hits the center of the circle. This happens on the summer solstice. It's not an accident, it's a message from 4,500 years ago. Stonehenge is the most famous prehistoric site in the world, and the mystery has layers. Who built it? How they moved stones that weigh 50 tons? And the biggest question, why go to that much trouble? For a long time, people saw it as an isolated thing, a ring of giants on an empty plain, but new technology has changed that story completely. The Stonehenge Hidden Landscapes Project. They used ground-penetrating radar, magnetometry. They scanned the whole area, and they found more than just stones. They found a huge, hidden ritual landscape, dozens of monuments no one knew about, processional avenues, burial mounds. Stonehenge wasn't a solitary temple. It was the centerpiece, the glittering center of a huge sacred complex. Then there's the how. A feat of Neolithic engineering. The largest stones, the sarcens, came from Marlborough Downs, about 20 miles north, but the smaller ones, the bluestones, came from much farther. Their origin is in Wales, the Preseli Hills, over 150 miles away. How do you do that without wheels, without draft animals? One theory says glaciers might have moved some bluestones closer during the Ice Age. But the main view is human effort, staggering human effort. They were probably moved on sledges, rollers, maybe rafts, a monumental task. It would have taken hundreds of people, maybe thousands, over generations. That kind of communal effort points straight to the deepest question, the why. What belief was powerful enough for this? What need? For a long time, the main theory was astronomical. a giant stone calendar to predict solstices, eclipses, and the alignments are real, they're there. But archaeology shows a more complex picture. Excavations show Stonehenge was used as a cemetery for centuries, especially for high-status people. Some researchers look at the blue stones. Their specific geology, they propose it was a healing sanctuary, that the stones themselves had curative powers, that pilgrims came from all over Britain. Then there's a more recent theory from an archaeologist named Mike Parker Pearson. He proposes a duality, a profound one. He suggests a nearby site, Durrington Walls, a place with huge wooden structures that was the land of the living, where the community feasted, celebrated, and Stonehenge, in contrast, was the land of the dead, a permanent stone monument for ancestors, for the afterlife. A ceremonial avenue connects the two, symbolizing the journey between worlds. That idea changes Stonehenge from an observatory to a cosmological statement. It was probably all of these things: an astronomical marker, a dynastic cemetery, a place of healing, and above all, a unifying symbol. A project so vast it required cooperation across different tribes. Across regions of Neolithic Britain, it gave a scattered, farming people a shared identity, a sacred center. To stand before those stones is to feel an ancient drive. The human need to mark time and space with something permanent, to reach for the cosmos, to honor those who came before, with a grandeur meant to echo for millennia. That same impulse to build toward the heavens, to create an axis between earth and sky, it finds a parallel across the Atlantic, not with stones but with mounds. Towering earthen mounds that form precise geometric shapes. Stonehenge was built to last forever. But sometimes a monument carries a message for the future, only to be destroyed before that future ever comes. In 1980, workers showed up on a remote hilltop in Elbert County, Georgia. They built this huge granite structure, 6 slabs holding up a capstone, altogether over 100 tons. They named it the Georgia Guidestones. It had 10 guidelines for humanity carved into it in 8 different languages. The messages talked about reason and harmony, but also stranger things, like keeping the human population under 500 million, in balance with nature. And it worked as an astronomical calendar too, with holes and slots to track the sun and the stars. The man who paid for it only used a fake name, R.C. Christian. He said he represented a small group of loyal Americans. Who he actually was, that's still the central mystery. For more than 40 years, the Guidestones just stood there, this modern puzzle. Were they a plan for after a collapse, a new age statement, or just provocative land art? Then in 2022, someone used explosives. They damaged it badly. What was left got taken down later for safety. That sudden, violent end changed it. It went from a curious landmark to a real archaeological mystery, but from our own time. The questions stack up now. Who was R.C. Christian? What was his group really trying to do? Why stay anonymous? And maybe the bigger question, why was the structure seen as such a threat that someone had to blow it up? The Guidestones make you think about how fast the present turns into the past. They were a message in stone, meant for a future thousands of years from now. But they became a relic in just decades. They make you wonder what happens when people argue over a monument's meaning while it's still standing, when the future it was meant for isn't here yet, but the present decides it has to go. This recent, provocative puzzle about messages and their erasure, that leads you to think about an ancient material, one so legendary people debate if it was ever real. A metal they say was worth more than gold, with properties that seem to defy nature itself. Plato described a lost city. He mentioned a metal there called Orichalcum. He said it covered the temple walls, that it sparkled. The name means mountain copper. For a long time, people thought it was just a myth, something invented to make the story shine. But then you have to ask, was it real? That's really two questions. Did this metal exist, and if it did, what was it? Other ancient writers talk about it. Pliny the Elder wrote that orichalcum became rare, that it was mined, that it was valuable, used for decoration for coins. From the descriptions, it sounds like a kind of brass. Copper and zinc with a golden red color. The clue came from the sea, from a shipwreck. In 2015, off Sicily, they found a wreck from about 600 BCE. Among the cargo were these ingots, 39 of them. They analyzed the metal. It was an alloy, copper and zinc, with some nickel and iron. It wasn't regular copper. It wasn't standard bronze. The archaeologist Sebastiano Tusa, he said the composition was unusual for that period. He said this could be it. This could be what they called orichalcum. The ship was Greek, sailing to Sicily. This was a time when such an alloy would have been rare, prestigious. This find doesn't prove Atlantis was real, but it suggests the metal was. That orichalcum was based on a real technology, a specific formula for a special brass, a kind of technical secret held by certain workshops. The recipe could have been lost later, to time or to war, fading from history into legend. That's where the mystery is, a physical object lighting up an old story. The search for a mythical metal leads to a sunken ship, a cargo that matches an ancient description. It shows our ancestors were experimenting with materials, trying to create something that seemed almost magical. That gleam on a temple wall in a story, or on a corroded ingot underwater. It's about transforming the ordinary, making it extraordinary. They found a piece of parchment in a dusty corner of an old palace. This was in 1929 in Istanbul at the Topkapi Palace. Workers were going through the Imperial Library and they saw it, a map drawn on gazelle skin. It was signed by the Ottoman Admiral Piri Reis, dated 1513. At first, it was just a beautiful artifact. It showed the coasts of Europe, Africa, the Americas, but then people looked closer. At the very bottom, below the Atlantic, they saw a landmass. It had bays, rivers, mountains, and it was connected to South America by this thin, curious strip of land. The shape was familiar to some. It looked like Antarctica, the Queen Maud Land coast specifically, and it was shown without any ice. That was impossible. Antarctica wasn't sighted until 1820, and its real coastline under all that ice wasn't mapped until the 20th century with seismic tools. So how could a 16th century admiral know it? The map's own notes add to the puzzle. Piri Reis wrote in the margins. He said he made the map from about 20 source charts. He credited Christopher Columbus, and he mentioned using ancient maps from the time of Alexander the Great. That's the heart of it. Did he have access to ancient source maps? Maps from a civilization so advanced they could chart a continent that would be buried in ice for thousands of years. The idea is staggering. It would mean a prehistorical time, maybe thousands of years ago, when Antarctica's coasts were warm and could be sailed. A time from which no known civilization could have passed down such precise data. Mainstream historians have another view. Scholars like Gregory McIntosh say the land isn't Antarctica at all. It's a distorted version of South America's east coast. That thin connecting strip could be a mistake, the Rio de la Plata estuary. The bays might be places like the Gulf of San Matias. Mapmakers back then worked from conflicting sailor reports, blending guesswork with fact. The result could be a familiar continent drawn in an unfamiliar way. But for those who see Antarctica, the fit is compelling. In the 1950s, a cartographer named Arlington Mallory said the map's projection, when corrected, matched seismic surveys of the coastline under the ice. Later analyses have been debated. Some say the correlation is loose. Others say it's too precise to be coincidence. This is what a historical anomaly is. It sits at the edge of evidence. It taunts our linear story of discovery. It asks if knowledge can be lost, buried in time itself. Was Piri Reis just brilliant with confused reports? Or was he the last scribe copying from a chart so old its origins are forgotten? The map doesn't answer, it just exists, a ghost of a coastline on a piece of skin. A whisper that the world might have been mapped long before we think it was. And this puzzle of captured geography leads to another puzzle, a puzzle of captured life. A biological snapshot from an age before memory. The carvings seem to move in low light. There's a hillside near Glasgow, sloping, and on it is a single slab of sandstone. It stretches over 40 feet long. The surface is covered, a dense tapestry of Neolithic art. More than 90 distinct symbols are etched into that rock. Concentric circles ripple out, deep cup marks dot the surface. Lines connect spirals that seem to swirl inward endlessly. This is the Cochno Stone, one of the most elaborate examples of prehistoric rock art in all of Europe. And it was hidden for 50 years, buried in soil to protect it from vandalism. Then in 2015, archaeologists excavated it again, carefully, revealing its full complexity to a new generation. And the immediate question is obvious. What does it all mean? The patterns are abstract but deliberate. They feel like a language, but we have no dictionary for it. Archaeologist Kenny Brophy has studied the stone. He notes the fundamental challenge. We're trying to interpret abstract art from a culture that left no written explanation. Their thoughts, their beliefs are silent, so we look for patterns in the theories. Some researchers see a celestial map. The spirals and circles could chart the movements of the sun and moon or mark significant astronomical events. Others propose a connection to altered states. The swirling designs might mirror the visual phenomena of deep trance or ritual, a map of an inner journey. Or perhaps they were territorial markers denoting clan lands or sacred spaces. Or maybe they were seen as portals, literal gateways to the underworld or the realm of spirits, with the cup marks acting as symbolic entry points. And what's fascinating is these same symbols aren't unique to Cochno. You find similar cup and ring marks scattered across Atlantic Europe, from Ireland and Britain to Spain and Portugal. That suggests a shared symbolic language, a set of ideas that traveled with people or emerged independently, speaking to common human experiences across vast distances. The modern act of reburying the stone for its protection feels like a profound echo, an echo of ancient reverence. 5,000 years ago, people invested immense effort to carve these messages into the living rock. In our time, we covered it with earth to save it. Both acts treat the stone as something more than a rock. It is a vessel, it holds meaning, the swirling patterns pull you in. They ask you to consider what universal experiences they might encode, the cycle of life and death, the journey of the sun, the depths of the human mind. They are a permanent record of wonder, carved by hands that felt the same awe we feel when we look at the stars, and this mystery of symbolic stone leads us to a legend. A legend of unimaginable material wealth, a city said to be paved with it. Gold was in their minds long before they was in the ground. The name El Dorado, the Gilded One. It started with a man, Spanish conquistadors in the early 1500s, there in the highlands of Colombia, and they hear stories from the local people about a ritual at a lake, Lake Guatavita. When a new leader of the Muisca people would take power, there was a ceremony. They'd cover the future ruler in a sticky resin, then blow gold dust all over him until he shone like the sun. Then they'd take him out on a raft to the center of the lake. He would dive in, wash the gold off his body as an offering, and his people would throw things in after him. Gold figurines, emeralds, jewelry. It was a spiritual act, a renewal, connecting leadership to the divine through sacrifice. But the Spanish, they heard this through a lens of greed. They heard one thing, gold, a king of gold, a lake of gold. The story changed, grew. El Dorado stopped being a person and became a place, a lost city of impossible wealth, hidden in the jungles or the mountains. It became a mirage, a phantom. It drew expeditions one after another to their ruin. Men like Gonzalo Pizarro, Sir Walter Raleigh, they spent fortunes, lives searching for it. Lured deeper by whispers, the tragedy is the core truth was always there. The Muisca were master goldsmiths. Their culture valued the metal not as money but for its light. Its connection to the sun god. Archaeology has found things from the region, delicate pendants, intricate tunjos, these small votive figures, the Muisca raft, a golden sculpture of the ceremony itself. The wealth was real, but it was never a paved city. It was a tradition, a sacred expression. So the myth of El Dorado is really about perception, how a sacred ritual becomes a legend of treasure. It's born from a collision, two worlds. One side couldn't comprehend the values of the other. The Spanish only saw gold as wealth to take, not as a medium for the divine. The legend shows how stories shape history. A spiritual offering becomes a beacon for conquest, a dream that consumes the people who chase it. Desire transforms a single truth into a labyrinth of fantasy. And when the gleam of that golden myth fades, you see a different kind of loss, not of gold, of knowledge, the haunting specter of a library set ablaze. Gold was a tangible dream, and it drew men to ruin. But there's another kind of treasure, one of pure knowledge that's said to be lost, somewhere in the heart of a fortress. Beneath the stone towers, beneath the gilded domes of the Moscow Kremlin, a legend persists about a library that could rewrite history. This is the lost library of Ivan the Terrible. It's described as the ultimate treasure hunt for a bibliophile, a collection of ancient Greek and Roman scrolls and codices so vast it would dwarf the Library of Alexandria. The story starts with a marriage. In the late 15th century, Ivan III married Sophia Palaeologina. She was the niece of the last Byzantine emperor. She came to Moscow from Rome, and lore says she brought a priceless dowry, a library of classical texts salvaged from Constantinople's fall. These were works of philosophy, science, literature thought lost to the Western world. The collection was supposedly expanded by her grandson, Ivan the Terrible, a learned but volatile ruler who is said to cherish the books and hide them away in secret vaults beneath the Kremlin. The historical evidence is thin, but it's there. Foreign diplomats visiting Ivan's court wrote of a magnificent library, glimpsed briefly or described in hushed tones. A Livonian nobleman, Johann Taub, and a Swedish officer wrote of a hidden chamber filled with Greek books, but after Ivan's time, the library vanishes. It disappears from the record. Did it ever truly exist as described, or was it an amalgamation of smaller collections, magnified by rumor and hope? For centuries, the search has been an obsession. Archaeologists and enthusiasts have probed the labyrinth under the Kremlin, tunnels and cellars. Using old maps and ground-penetrating radar, they've found hidden rooms. Sealed chambers, but no library. The theories for its fate are numerous as the books it might have held. Maybe it was destroyed in one of Moscow's great fires. Its parchment and vellum turned to ash. Maybe it was looted during upheaval, its volumes scattered and lost, or the most compelling possibility, it remains undiscovered. Waiting in a forgotten crypt preserved by the cold, dry earth, historian Isadora Levin once reflected on the significance of such a loss. She noted that a library isn't just a storehouse of texts. It's a snapshot of a civilization's mind. To lose it is to lose a conversation with the past, a direct line to how people once understood their universe. Imagine the knowledge that could be locked away, complete plays by Sophocles, lost histories by Tacitus, scientific works by Archimedes that could alter our timeline of discovery. This lost library represents the ghost of a Renaissance Russia might have had, a path of learning abruptly closed. The tragedy is one of silence, where the potential for understanding was simply sealed behind a wall. This profound loss of written knowledge, it stands in contrast to another mystery, one that involves not a loss but a sudden gain, an astronomical insight so advanced it seems to have appeared from nowhere. Carved into the walls of a medieval cathedral, the relief is inside the Temple of Hathor. It's carved into a dark stone wall. There's a large, oblong shape. Like a glass bulb, inside it, a snake, its body held straight. This bulb shape rests on a pillar, and from its base, a cable seems to run to a box. A kneeling figure holds the box. To a modern eye, it looks like a giant light bulb. That's the Dendera Light. It's become a cornerstone for this idea that ancient Egyptians might have used electricity. The image seems clear, literal, a bulb with a filament powered by a box that could be a battery. It fits a narrative of lost technology, knowledge we've forgotten. It's what's called an out-of-place artifact, something that appears too advanced for its time. It sparks theories, paleo contact, or visitors from elsewhere sharing secrets. But archaeology has a different reading, rooted in the symbols and myths of the culture itself. Egyptologists point to the components. The bulb is actually a lotus flower, a symbol of birth and creation. The snake inside is the god Harsomptus, often shown as a serpent emerging from a lotus to bring light into the world. The pillar it rests on is a jed pillar, the symbol of stability, the backbone of Osiris. The box held by the priest is likely a ceremonial chest, and the cable is probably a ritual staff or a serpent itself. The entire scene is a complex religious symbol. It depicts the moment of divine creation, the spark of life emerging from the primordial waters, contained and stabilized by the power of Osiris. It's about spiritual illumination, not electrical light. Scholars reject the ancient electricity theory for a practical reason: a complete lack of physical evidence. If they had light bulbs, where are the remnants, the fragile glass, the metal filaments, the wires, the power sources? The Baghdad Battery, if it was even a battery, produces a tiny charge. Not enough to illuminate a bulb. There are no soot-free tombs suggesting electric lamps, no mentions in their extensive texts, no technological progression leading to such a device. The theory asks us to believe in a single, miraculous image with no supporting infrastructure. This mystery is less about ancient technology, more about modern perception. It asks a reflective question. When we look at the ancient past, are we seeing it for what it was, or are we holding up a mirror? Our world is defined by electricity, by bulbs and switches, so when we see a shape that reminds us of that, our minds jump to fill the gap. We project our own reality onto their symbolism. The Dendera relief is a masterpiece of sacred art. Its power was in its meaning, not its function. It was meant to illuminate minds, not rooms. There was this sacred art, meant for spiritual illumination, but we see it now through a lens of technology. That same projection, that desire to find our own image in the past, it takes physical form in another object. A life-sized human skull, carved from a single block of clear quartz, flawless. It catches the light, breaks it into rainbows. The surface is impossibly smooth. The teeth, the eye sockets, rendered with a precision that feels almost supernatural. These are the crystal skulls. For over a century, they were presented as relics from a lost Mesoamerican world, Aztec, maybe Maya. They were said to hold mystical properties, vessels of ancient knowledge, tools for divination. Some even said artifacts from Atlantis. Their allure was powerful. It tapped directly into a romantic vision, a magical, technologically advanced past. The mystery grew. Were they genuine pre-Columbian masterpieces, showing a lapidary skill beyond what we thought possible, or were they something else? The answer came through 20th century science, places like the British Museum, the Smithsonian. They subjected the skulls to analysis. Researchers used high-powered microscopes on the surfaces. What they found was telling. The tool marks in the quartz were crisp, straight lines, Perfectly circular grooves, these marks were consistent with modern, rotary wheel cutting tools, tools powered by electricity or a foot treadle. They weren't the irregular, multidirectional scratches from pre-Columbian hand tools. Those would have used abrasives, sand and water on a string. The evidence was clear. The most famous skulls, like the one called the Mitchell-Hedges skull, almost certainly crafted in the 19th century, likely made in workshops in Europe, Germany or France, where there was a booming market for exotic antiquities. They were beautiful fakes, masterful, yet even after being debunked, the myth endures. Why? The crystal skulls speak to a deep human desire, the desire for a tangible connection to a magical antiquity, for proof that ancient peoples had secret, advanced knowledge, knowledge we've forgotten. They fit into narratives of lost civilizations. Psychic power, they offer a physical object, something onto which we can project our fantasies. Their very perfection makes them suspect to an archaeologist. But that same perfection makes them irresistible to the imagination. They ask us what we're truly seeking when we look at the past. Are we seeking understanding? Or are we seeking wonder? Sometimes the most captivating artifact isn't the one that tells a true story. It's the one that tells the story we desperately wish were true. This journey through crafted illusion, though, it leads directly to a discovery that's unsettlingly real, undeniably real, a find that offers no easy answers. Only a profound, silent question about the nature of belief itself. The ground gave up its secret during a routine dig. This was in 2009. Archaeologists were working ahead of a new road in Weymouth on the southern coast of England. Their tools scraped against something unexpected. Not one skeleton. Dozens, 54 headless men were laid in a pit, and nearby a separate pile held 51 skulls. The scene was stark, a snapshot of a single, violent event from the late Anglo-Saxon period. This wasn't a careless burial, it was a deliberate deposit. The men were all young, strong, and they had all met the same end. Forensic science turned these bones from a statistic into a story. Isotope analysis of their teeth told a tale of origin. The chemical signatures in the enamel pointed north to Scandinavia. These were Vikings, likely a raiding party that sailed across the North Sea, only to be captured on the English shore. The date, around the year 1000, places them in a time of relentless conflict. The mystery isn't who they were, but who stopped them. Was it the local feared, the Anglo-Saxon militia defending their homes? Or was it the organized forces of the English king, Ethelred the Unready, enacting a brutal policy to deter further raids? The manner of their passing adds a layer. The decapitations were performed from the front, not from behind. This suggests a controlled, almost ritualized execution. The site archaeologist David Score noted the physicality of the act, described it as an intense and focused effort. This wasn't a hasty battlefield killing, it was a statement, a display of power and retribution meant to be seen. The separate piling of the skulls reinforces this. It speaks to a symbolic act, a warning to other raiders, or an offering of thanks for a victory. This discovery pulls back a curtain on the Viking Age. It reveals a harsher reality than the sagas often convey. For every successful raid and settlement, there were countless voyages that ended in silence. In Earth, these headless men of Dorset are a testament to the fierce resistance they faced. They force a question: how do we balance our fascination with Viking exploration and culture with the evidence of the fear they inspired and the brutal justice they sometimes received? Their bones are a silent counterpoint to the gleaming swords and dragon ships of legend, a reminder that history is written not only by the victors, but sometimes by the soil that holds the lost. A cave was sealed by a rockfall for over 20,000 years. Then, in 1994, in the Ardèche region of France, 3 explorers felt a draft of air from a small opening. They widened it, crawled inside, and their headlamps swept across a chamber. What they saw wasn't just art, it was a time capsule from the last ice age. The Chauvet Cave, its walls were alive with herds of stampeding horses, with woolly rhinos locking horns, with cave lions drawn with a fluid grace that seemed to move in the flickering light. These weren't crude sketches, they were masterpieces, the oldest known figurative paintings in the world from around 36,000 years ago. The immediate awe came from their sophistication. The artists used the natural contours of the rock to give the animals volume. They used shading. They showed motion and perspective in ways that feel startlingly modern. An artistic Big Bang happening in the dark during an age of glaciers. But the deeper mysteries are in the choices the artists made. Why, among hundreds of animal portraits, are there almost no complete human figures? There are outlines of hands stenciled on the wall and one strange partial figure, the lower body of a woman merged with a bison. It's as if the human form was intentionally avoided. The focus was overwhelmingly on the animal world, and not just any animals. Predators dominate: cave lions, bears, rhinos, mammoths, animals that were dangerous, powerful, and not primary food sources. The accuracy is breathtaking. The cave lions lack manes, a detail modern science only later confirmed through fossils, that suggests not a fleeting glimpse but prolonged, careful observation. A deep knowledge passed down. So what was this place? It was almost certainly not a living space. The cave is deep, difficult to access. The paintings are often in remote chambers. The leading theory is that it was a sacred site, a place for ritual, a shamanic portal where, by torchlight, communities might have sought to connect with the spirit of the animals they relied on and feared. To capture their essence on the wall was perhaps to gain power over them or to honor them. One painting stands out for its implication. On one wall, researchers identified a spray of dots above a frieze of animals. After analysis, they concluded it depicts a volcanic eruption. A nearby volcano, the Bass Vivarais, was active at precisely the time the cave was in use. If correct, this is the oldest known depiction of a natural event, not a symbol but a report, a witness to a cataclysm recorded in ochre and charcoal. All of this leads to a final question. What does this explosion of genius in the cold and dark of prehistoric Europe tell us about being human? These artists weren't merely surviving. They were seeking meaning. They were translating awe, fear, observation, and memory into lines of beauty. They were storytellers. The cave was their cathedral, and the animals were their mythology. Their work suggests that the drive to create, to make sense of the world through representation, isn't a luxury of civilization. It's a fundamental part of our nature. It emerged alongside language, alongside tool use. To stand before these paintings is to feel a direct line, a connection across hundreds of generations. We look at their lions and we recognize the same hand, the same mind that seeks to understand and portray the world today. The Chauvet Cave doesn't baffle historians because it's inexplicable. It baffles with its clarity. It offers a clear window into a moment when, against all odds of a harsh existence, the human spirit chose not just to live, but to declare, "We are here and we see the wonder." These 30 mysteries, they're found all over the world from different times, but they aren't random. They speak to each other. They tell a kind of shared story. And if you step back, you start to see patterns, deep currents running underneath. One pattern is the drive to build, to create something monumental against impossible odds. You see it at the pyramids of Giza, at the walls of Sacsayhuamán, the Moai of Rapa Nui, the mounds of Cahokia, and it's not just about utility, it's a declaration. A statement of identity, of belief, of power, carved right into the landscape. Societies with stone tools and human muscle, they chose to move mountains. They invested generations in work with no practical return, except the return of meaning, to stand together and say, "We can reshape the world." Then there's a second pattern. A darker one, the rhythm of collapse and adaptation, the late Bronze Age collapse, the emptying of Mesa Verde, the vanishing of the Roanoke colony. These aren't just failures. They're turning points. They show the pressure a society can take before it transforms, before it migrates or fragments. Often the trigger is environmental. A drought, a changing climate, but the response is human. It's a choice to hide underground like at Derinkuyu, to walk away from a cliff palace, to integrate with a new community and vanish from written history. These mysteries show that the end of a city isn't always the end of a people. It can be the start of a new chapter, written in a way we haven't learned to read yet. And then there's the language of symbol and art, the swirling spirals on the Cochno Stone, the animal masters in Chauvet Cave, the cryptic seals of the Indus Valley. The Nazca Lines drawn for the sky. This is humanity trying to communicate something ordinary words can't hold, a connection to the cosmos, to the spirit world, to the cycle of life and death. So many of these enigmas are about lost communication, the Voynich Manuscript's uncrackable code, the silent script of the Phaistos disk, the undeciphered symbols of the great Serpent mound. Their conversations we can no longer hear, stories, laws, prayers, frozen in form but mute in meaning. They show the fragility of knowledge. A library can burn, an oral tradition can fade with the last elder who held it. A technology, like the gearwork in the Antikythera Mechanism, can sink to the seabed and be forgotten for 1,000 years. But this is where the modern story offers a glimmer. Our tools for seeing the past are changing. Satellite archaeology finds lost cities under jungle canopies. Ground-penetrating radar maps entire ritual landscapes beneath English grass. DNA analysis can trace migrations. It can settle fierce debates like it did for the ancient one. We're slowly peeling back the layers, but the core human questions remain. Why did they build this? What did they believe? What caused them to leave? Science can give us the when and the how, but the why lingers in the realm of interpretation, in story, and that's the enduring gift of these mysteries. They aren't empty gaps, they're spaces for wonder. They force us to confront the vastness of human experience, the diversity of solutions to being alive on this planet. They show a journey not of steady progress but of brilliant flashes, of quiet disappearances, of resilient adaptation, a narrative full of question marks. And those questions don't confuse us, they propel us forward, forever curious about the profound and beautiful puzzle of our own past. We've crossed continents and thousands of years. Sunken cities, stones lined up with stars, scripts no one can read, machines that shouldn't exist. These 30 mysteries, they aren't just riddles, they're like markers. They show how much of the past is still dark to us. They pull you up short, make you realize how little we know, and at the same time they point to what people could do. The cleverness, the depth of belief, every question left open, it's like a door, an invitation to look closer, to ask, to just wonder. Mortimer Wheeler said archaeology was the peeping Tom of the sciences. A sandbox for people who don't need a destination. They just want to see where everyone else has been. So wonder, keep asking. The next big find, it might be right under the next shovel of dirt. If these stuck with you, there's more out there. You can go deeper, and if you have your own thoughts, well, that's what the comments are for.